So everyone should see on screen slide 2, the STP eBilling admin training. It's a bulleted list of the items we're going to cover today. So we're going to start with self-determination terminology, a general overview of the changes we made on eBilling for self-determination, and then the basic regional center administrator functions, which will include the system values tab, the data transfer tab, the admin report, the user roles, and the user setup. So one of the goals when we modified eBilling to accommodate self-determination is to make it very similar to traditional eBilling. So a lot of this will seem familiar if you're already an RC administrator. It'll just be slightly different. And I'm going to say now, when you access self-determination eBilling, you go to the same website that you currently go to for traditional eBilling, but you will be given a unique self-determination program user ID, and that's how the system knows to log you into the self-determination module and not the traditional eBilling module. So if you need a comprehensive list of self-determination terminology, or if you have program staff who are asking you for more information, we've started to put a user manual together with a list in the back of self-determination program-specific terms that can be accessed on the dds.ca.gov/AST website, and that will get updated as we get more questions also and more items. But it is out there now for you to look at and review and to share with your staff. So some of the biggest changes are the financial management services provider, FMS. That is a term that refers to the vendor who is assisting the participant in managing and directing their funds and their budget. And that is the one vendor that has to be vendored with the regional center. The other terminology that's new is the rendering service provider. And this is the person or the entity actually providing the service to the individual consumer in STP. They are not required to be vendored by the regional center in our understanding, but the vendor is required to enter that information when they create the STP invoice. Thank you.
Did he mute us?
I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay, I'm going to keep going. I don't think that was a question. The one other big change is service delivery type, which we've abbreviated SD. So the service delivery type option, the consumer has selected to receive their services through the regional center. Service delivery type is part of the case management system functionality, so it's not included in this training, but we might refer to it because all consumers that are in the self-determination program will have a service delivery type of S. Okay, so we're now on slide 4.
Wait, I'm sorry. What was that letter? What would it be? S?
It will be S as in Sam for self-determination. And if you need more information about the service delivery type, I would suggest contacting your case management services provider because it will be entered into that system.
This is Kim Neighbors, part of the application support team. I'm going to talk about the general application setup and what you'll see when you log in as into the STP module of eBilling. So as you can see, the interface should look familiar to you. The things that we changed on the Home tab include is instead of saying search by SPN, we're searching by the FMS number, since that's all you'll be dealing with in the self-determination program. Other than that, the Home tab has remained the same. There's a new tab called Budgets, and this is where the regional center will input the consumer's budgets for the course of their year in the SDP program. The next new tab is called Provider Management, and this is going to be used by the financial management services vendors in order to input and track the rendering service providers. So the regional center will be able to view the information that's in here, but they won't be able to edit, modify, or add anything to it. Then we have the SDP invoices. These, one of the main differences between traditional eBilling and SDP is going to be the fact that the FMS vendor is going to generate your invoice. So the SDP invoices tab is viewable by the regional center, but the functionality on it is strictly going to be an FMS vendor. SDB payments, these will separate out from your regular traditional. Then we have our reports tab. We, because of the shared environment, we had to change what was the service provider management tab to now read user management tab. That way there was no confusion with the provider management. And then your administration tab. So some of the things that have changed with the systems value tab, which if you're an RC administrator already, you know that this is available under the administration tab. We added an option for budget approval, and basically when, if you select, your regional center selects this checkbox, when a budget is approved or rejected, then the user who created the budget should receive an email letting them know. The system administrator is going to need to input an email address. This is similar to what you already have in your traditional eBilling. And then also the regional center contact email. So when vendors select the mail icon in the screen, it will automatically be addressed to the email address that you input in this box. So if you're going to have a program person who's going to be able to answer questions regarding SDP, that may be more of a functionality for this email than your system administrator email. The last option is a nightly report for approved and rejected budgets. Basically, overnight in the process, it will go to the system administrator and provide a list of all the budgets that were approved or rejected during that day. Are there any questions about this?
I have a question. This is Mary Lou from Inland Regional Center. You know how it's the reverse? It's the FMS is the one generating their own invoice, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So how often they have to do that? Because we usually are scheduled to run our invoices. So how do they do that? Do they have a schedule to run it in a monthly basis, or they just do it in any time they do?
This is Emily from PDS, and I'll answer that. So the system, eBilling and UFS, has been modified to allow the vendor to submit invoices as frequently as you want them to or as they need to. But really determining that is up to your regional center, and probably a question that we can direct a program. So if you'd like, this is Mary Lou, right?
Yes.
If you'd like, I can, and I can actually follow up because probably multiple people are wondering that, with our program contact who's running the program and ask if they have any guidelines.
Okay.
Because technically, the system can accommodate multiple invoices in the month, as many as you want them to do. But I'm not sure what the program requirement or regulation is. So I'll follow up with her, and then we'll send out to the group. We'll make that as a question that needs to be answered.
So are we paying them in arrear, or?
Yeah, they still should not be invoicing until the service has been provided. The thing with the SDP invoices, since they're the ones that are going to be generating it, they'll have their own, like, you know, whoever the providers are, the providers have to provide their invoices to them by the 10th of the month, and we'll generate our invoices to the regional center by the 20th, and then hopefully we'll get paid within 10 days and be paid by the end of the month.
And I believe we go over the mechanics of the SDP invoice a little bit more in detail during the FMS training, and also a little bit during the RC analyst training, I think.
Okay, so I think we'll just.
Okay.
Hi, I'm sorry, this is GGRC. We have one more question before you move the screen. For the contact information, email address, there's only one email address. There's no CC. So if that person's on vacation or is out sick, is there any way that we can add a CC to that, for that email, or
in
this control that?
In this initial release, that option is not there. We've already built in an enhancement that more than one person can be listed under regional center contact email. One of the things that you probably are going to want to do is set up a shared box for STP and then allow multiple users to be able to access and read it. That way, if one person is on vacation, another person has access. So, for example, our application support email is AST. There's about 7 of us that can read the box.
Okay, that'll work, thanks.
Kimberly, it's Isabel at North Bay. Can you go back one screen, please, on the very first box, automatically email users when budgets have been approved? Is that whoever created the budget? And is that the email that is associated to their login?
Should be the person who created the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Use the profile.
Okay, so moving on, another part of Regional Center Administrator functionality under the Administrator tab is the data transfer. We did have to add some additional functionality for STP, and again, you will only see this if you are logged in as a Self-Determination Program RC admin. So we had developed 3 new data transfer processes and also a multiple budget upload functionality. So starting from the top, the import STP UFS information, this ties the eBilling invoice to the UFS invoice by adding the UFS invoice number to eBilling. So as I said before, the FMS is going to be generating that invoice. It'll be given a reference number on eBilling. When you receive it in UFS and start processing, UFS is going to assign an invoice number to it. And in order to attach that invoice number to it, that information gets pumped back out into the web. These are the on-demand options. There's also the nightly job that will run these functions automatically every night. The other thing that we added was update consumer information. This is going to import your UCIs that have been added to the self-determination supplemental file, which is called CLI STP, and it's going to move all the consumer information into eBilling along with the dates that they are starting self-determination, and if they exit, it will populate an exit date as well. So this is going to be driven by your case management system and how your case management system does processing and puts information into this file in UFS. This is a UFS file. The next thing is transfer web invoices to UFS. Basically, this is the on-demand job of if you want to pump your FMS invoices into UFS instead of waiting for the nightly job. This is similar to what you have now with traditional. The release batch, process, lock, and the view data transferable files, that's similar, but it will strictly work with the SDP module. And finally, we gave you the ability to upload multiple budgets, and we're going to cover that in just a few minutes. The EFT button is shared between both traditional and SDP eBilling. So if you do push the import EFT information as an SDP user, it is going to pump out the traditional information as well. So as I mentioned, there is data transfers are available on demand, but also the nightly process has been added, and when it runs, or if you do the on-demand, you're going to get some new reports. You'll notice that we kept the numbers similar for the inbound audit report. We just tacked an S onto the end to indicate it's for self-determination. Part of the checks that happened when invoices are pumped in are on these new reports, PS 064S. One is for invalid invoices and one is for valid invoices. We'll cover in more detail what those are in the UFS invoice training tomorrow, I believe. And then we have also the exception report. All of these reports will be available on the UFS side in the workspool file for eBilling, which is where your regular information is now pushed out to. Any questions about the data transfer process? Uploading multiple budgets. So as you get, your consumers set up, you may decide that you want to, have a group of 20 or 25 that you want to upload all at one time rather than having individual users input them. And so we did provide this functionality. It's using a Excel file that is saved into CSV format. And you have to input the basic information for the FMS, the UCI, the person's first and last name, the date that they are beginning their budget, so that's the budget begin date, and then the budget end date, which is 1 calendar year. The Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3 is terminology for the budget categories, which we'll go over in the RC analyst training tomorrow. So you would put the dollar amounts that the SDP consumers are going to have available to them to use. And then the last one is an advance. If the FMS is being advanced money on the consumer, then that information can be entered here. Again, on the screen, the little screenshot at the bottom, you see the upload a budget file. It tells you the format and what those, what the information is needed to be in that CSV file. And then it's a simple select the file, click the upload button, and it will populate into eBilling. After that, somebody will have to go in and submit them for approval individually, and this is also a way that you can double check and make sure that everything imported okay. And again, we'll talk about all that in the RC analyst training.
Okay, so this is Emily again. I'm going to talk about the administrator report. So just like in traditional e-billing, under the admin tab for the RC admin users, you have access to a specific set of reports that can be pulled into Microsoft Excel to help you sort and manage the data. So the STP reports are not available in traditional e-billing. So if you want to get the self-determination specific reports, you have to log in with your self-determination user ID. Some of them don't require any filtering criteria, but some of them do require like an FMS number to bring up just a select portion of the information. So we have some reports that are similar to traditional e-billing. There's a report where you can get all of the user email addresses for self-determination program users. I know that's similar to one in traditional e-billing. You can also run a report to bring up all of the UCIs that are in the system, but that are not assigned to a selected FMS provider to help you track which UCIs still need a budget created to go with them. You can also do a report for UCIs that are assigned to a selected FMS. So if you've lost track of which FMS is for which UCI number, you can bring that up. And like I said, it comes up into Excel, so it's really nice to sort and filter. You can also bring up a list of approved, rejected budgets, or you can bring up a list of all the budgets on that report. You can bring up a list of the participants who have exited the self-determination program. a report of budget information, which has the UCI number and then the budget category amounts for each consumer. You can bring up a report of the average budget information for consumers, budget history, so you can see what budget amounts for a consumer and then what was spent and what's remaining. A monthly budget statement for a consumer, so you would input the UCI number, and then it will bring up what transactions happened on that month for that consumer. That's very similar to, like, if you think of a bank statement and you would sort by a month. It has the consumer number, and then it shows the budget amounts at the beginning of the month, what was debited throughout the month for which service codes, and then what's remaining. The outstanding advance amounts. So this is something we're not sure it's a feature you're going to use, but the system will handle the use of advanced funds. So if that's something your regional center is using, there is a report to help you track which consumers were given advanced funds and how much is left. And then we also have a listing of consumer updates. So I believe that is when new consumers are transferred into the system, you can run that report and bring up a list of the consumers that were transferred into the system like the previous night or something, you know, in the previous time period. So those are all available to the RC admin. They run in Excel, and hopefully they will make your jobs of tracking SDP a little bit easier. So, and I think next we're going to go into user roles.
Oh, hi everyone, Richie here from ASC as well, and I'm going to go over the user roles available in SDP. So the first one is the RC Admin STP, and that has access to all the FMS vendors, all the admin reports, system values, and the data transfer tab. The RC Approver role has access to all the FMS vendors as well, is read-only of budgets, and can approve and reject the budget. The RC Analyst role is the general working user role. It requires input of the FMS number in the user role setup and the UCI number in the user role setup. Going on, the FMS Admin STP requires input of the FMS number when set up. It is view budget only. It can create and submit invoices. It can also unlock invoices. It has full control of the provider management tab and can view SDP EFT payments and the reports tab. The FMS Staff STP role requires input of the vendor number and UCI when set up. It's view budget only. It can access the provider management tab, create, submit invoices, and can also view the reports tab. And then the FMS Staff STP no payment is the same as the staff, but has no payment tab or payment report. And then the reader role is only view only of all the tabs. It must be assigned a vendor and has access to all the UCIs with budgets for that specific vendor. And then any questions so far? No. Okay. So user setup, you would go to the, you would be logged in as RC admin, right? And then go to the add user sub tab. You would click the username, and we suggest selecting a format slightly different from what is used in traditional eBilling, such as adding STP to their username. The first name and last name are required. Company name is optional. Email is required. Phone optional. Password, you'll have to set one up, and the user will have to change it. And we'll select the appropriate role for the specific user. And then also make sure to add the vendors and the UCIs where appropriate.
So we know that was a lot of information to take in. We will have more information available on the AST website soon. One of the things that I just want to touch on, since it wasn't in the slide, was the SDP RC Administrator role can create budgets but they cannot approve the budget. So the RC admin will have basically the same functionality as the RC analyst, plus the additional administrator features. Do you guys have any questions about anything that we've covered so far in relation to being an SDP RC administrator? Don't forget to take your phones off mute.
Okay, well, we can take a break here. We're supposed to start the,
Sending another slideshow for the next section.
we will send that to you, Pam, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to remind everyone also that we are recording this because we're going to be posting the webinars on the AST website once they are completed, so next week. Just so everyone knows, we are recording the audio. Once again, during this portion, we're going to give some program information about the business process flow as it relates to eBilling and UFS, process overview, service codes and rate setup in UFS, vendor setup, and then the authorization setup for a self-determination program. So I'm going to start, and I'm Emily from earlier, and I'm going to start with the general information about the self-determination program. If any of your staff have questions, can be found at the dds.ca.gov/STP website. So that's the DDS homepage. There's a special self-determination program question, self-determination program area that might be able to answer some of the business program questions. Also, policy-related training and other materials can be found in that same area. They have a section for the SDP materials. If you have any questions about the business program portion, the eBilling and UFS training materials will be located at the dds.ca.gov/AST webpage. After these webinars are complete, we'll have them posted next week, so you'll be able to access all of the PowerPoints and the webinars, in addition to some other materials that we're putting together. Okay, so to get to the STP business process overview, and this is actually already posted on the AST webpage if you have any questions. So self-determination program is very similar to traditional e-billing with a few key differences. When we worked with the regional centers to design a process that would work with UFS and e-billing for this program, our goal was to change the business process for your staff as little as possible, and also make it be a minimal work, as little as possible for you, to try to keep it the same. So you'll notice that self-determination starts on this slide in box 1, where the consumer chooses self-determination, and they determine with their regional center the budget, and the consumer selects an FMS. And then the part that feeds into our system is the service delivery type S is entered into your case management system. So whichever case management system you have will be able to accommodate the entry of a S service delivery type for self-determination, and that will transfer into UFS. And was there a question? Okay. From there, UFS will receive that service delivery type information, and that consumer would be marked in UFS as S for service delivery type, and that will tell the system that their authorization needs to include the self-determination program service code, and it will also transfer their information into eBilling so the budget can be entered there. The regional center will...
Could you zoom in a little bit if you can? Because the print is quite small for people in the back of the room.
Okay. Can you see that better?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you.
So we're at box 7, so we're in eBilling now. So the consumer has been marked as a self-determination service delivery type. That information was transferred into UFS and transferred into eBilling. And so on step 7, your staff will be able to enter the consumer budget into eBilling, and approve that budget, so it's available for invoicing by the vendor. And you'll notice box 9 is where this is a vendor or an FMS vendor activity. They will enter the invoice information, fill it out, and then submit the invoice. So this is where there's a key difference with traditional e-billing. I know that currently in traditional e-billing, your staff have to generate invoices on UFS, and then they transfer into e-billing, the vendor fills them out, and they transfer back. In self-determination, you do not have to generate the invoice on UFS. The FMS vendor will just go into e-billing when they need to, fill out the invoice, and submit it, and then it will transfer back into UFS, which is kind of where it goes back to being very similar with traditional e-billing. The invoice information can be transferred on demand when you need it to go into UFS, or it will be on the scheduled nightly job, just like it works now with traditional e-billing. UFS box 11 will receive that invoice information. At that point, it is assigned a UFS invoice number. So it will have an invoice number that looks just like all your other invoice numbers. It will be very similar. Obviously, they'll be unique. We don't reuse invoice numbers. Yeah, it will just automatically generate like normal. And you will also be receiving an inbound audit report that's specific for self-determination program invoices. At that point, for the valid invoices, they will go through the batch, accrue, and pay process. That's box 13. And that's very similar to how it is set up for traditional invoicing. There are some additional sorts or edits, so you can choose either to process self-determination program invoices with your traditional invoices. I'm sorry, I think someone has us on hold. Is muted? Can you, oh, thank you. So to get back to it, so there are some options when you choose to pull the invoices into batch, and we'll go over this later. You're able to selectively process just the self-determination program invoices or put them all with your traditional. You can choose to do them together or separate. So once the invoices have been batched, accrued, and paid, which is the same process as traditional invoicing, the invoice and payment information will be transferred back out into e-billing. And I should say, just like traditional invoicing, only the EFT payment information goes to e-billing. If your vendor is getting a paper check, just like with traditional invoicing, that will not be transferred out into e-billing. And so that's kind of the overarching high-level process flow for how STP invoicing will work with e-billing and UFS. I know that's a lot of questions. This information and this workflow specifically are posted on the AST website right now. So if you want a copy of it, please go out there and you can access it. Before we move on, are there any questions about that? Okay, we're going to go into service code.
This is Kim. So the service codes have been put together by programs here at GDS, and I'm just briefly going to talk about what range they are and how they relate to SDP. So the 310 through 399 range has been allocated out to use for self-determination program. We're not currently using all of those service codes, as you'll see as I show you the different budget areas related to them. There will be a one-page handout available on the AST website that gives you this list of service codes. These have not been populated to UFS yet, so they are not available. So the budget is broken down into 3 categories. The first category is service codes having to do with living arrangements. So your respite, your homemaker, and then your residential facility, as well as your financial management services service code is there as well. And you'll hear us either talk about this as a living arrangement or as budgeted category 1.
I have a question for LVN respite. Is that the same thing as respite?
That is going to be something that you're going to have to discuss with programs and how the service code should be used.
Yeah, I have to
Jim, this is Emily. I've written down that question, and I'll be sure to forward that to our business program section and see if we can email that answer out to the group.
Emily, this is Isabel at North Bay. Did we complete a crosswalk for the 300s to the traditional codes yet?
That is something I will ask business programs to do. We're not able to provide that information. We just added the functionality, but I will let them know that that's something you guys need.
All right, thank you.
Emily has to advance my slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
It's okay.
I apologize.
The second budget category is employment and community participation. These are service codes 331 through 355. They'll include most of your support services and non-medical transportation. And our largest distribution of service codes is in the health and safety section, or budget category 3, 356 through 399. These are pretty much most of your miscellaneous type services for the program. And there's one more slide that has the rest of them on there. So as you can see, we still have a lot of service code available to distribute out for SDP as maybe additional things are determined there as needed. So we're going to talk about what you need to do in UFS in order to use SDP. So as with any other new service code, you're going to need to set up the rate. And as with regular service codes, you have to set up that $0 rate with no vendor and no subcode before you can set up anything else. Be aware, because of the way the program is driven by the consumer and handled by the FMS, there's no attendance requirements or anything like that with this program, so there's no units and there's no subcodes, except for in the case of residential, and I'll discuss that in just a second. You can use, when you're setting up the rate, you can use any type you want. However, we highly recommend that you just use monthly variable or per item. And we also recommend that you set up $0 rates and actually input the authorized dollars manually on the authorization. And this is because the budget, how the budget is broken out and the dollars allocated to that are really going to drive how much you authorize for each service code. There is one residential service code, 321. This does need to be set up vendor specific, and because most of the time the dollar amount is going to be unique to the consumer, we recommend that you set it up with a unique subcode. While the FMS vendor won't be inputting this on the invoice, the system is going to go and identify it on the consumer's authorization. And we'll have we developed a conversion for UCIs that basically will allocate numbers and letters, and then that'll equal the consumer's UCI. So that is something you can do, or you can choose to do some other options for subcode setup for the residential rates. Because of the program, we're still going to be dealing with source of funds, and therefore the monthly rate that is established needs to include the board and care. Only use the residential GL account, and all of these must be set up as monthly. There is no daily rates. If the consumer has the trust, then you do need to do the additional setup in the trust maintenance and handle that as usual with the board file. Questions? Okay. So no changes were made to setting up the vendor. You're still going to be doing it via PSMEN1, and you need to input the service code in the detail record so that you can set up your authorizations correctly. And although you're not generating an invoice to go out to eBilling, you still need to input attendance, the calendar and attendance flags, and these should just be entered as NN. Also, don't forget to set up your FMS vendors in the PSME 81 menu, the electronic fund transfer menu, to be sure that they are eBilling set up. Otherwise, their vendor information is not going to go out to eBilling.
Any questions about that?
So on the authorization, the FMS is always going to be your vendor number. The unit should always be 1. Again, none of the invoices are set up to take anything other than 1. And you can only use annual or monthly frequency authorizations. No quarterlies, no biweeklies, nothing like that. Since the FMS vendor is driving the invoice, you can expect to allocate the amounts on an annual or monthly basis. And that'll also tie into the budget if you choose to do it on an annual. We do recommend that you use the multiple service header options for SDP. And if you've never done that before, we will have a handout for that talks about when you get to the service level screen, once you input your service and you update, you can page down, and it'll give you another blank screen that will have allow you to input another service code. The only exception to our authorizations for the frequency is the residential. Because of the source of funds, it does have to be set up as monthly. So for service code 321, you have to set up a monthly frequency authorization. And it can be combined in with your other service headers. It does not have to be separated out. Again, for residential, just 1 unit. And just a reminder, don't use ResFit or any other type of visit. The FMS should only invoice using the residential service code for consumer's actual residence payment. And so here's a screenshot of what a residential FMS service header might look like. I've chosen to use the conversion for the subcode, and so that on the spreadsheet will directly tie to the consumer ID number. I've only done units, and I do have the consumer getting SSI. And the vendor will submit the payment for the $42.12.63, and that'll process through correctly, as would normally happen with residential. And here's an example of a regular SDP service code being used. As you can see, if you look over on the right of the screen, it says service 5 of 6. So in this particular authorization, I actually have 6 service headers. I also have this set up as an annual, using a regular monthly unit type for the service and a total dollar amount that's going to coincide with the budget allowed for this service. And so here's an example of what the non-standard screen would look like for that service. We built in some additional authorization edits to account for when the consumer is getting self-determination program services versus when they're getting traditional services, and also whether or not you've used a correct service code based on the time period. So our 3 new edits are SBC D, because we have to code everything so that it's not really readable. Does not equal S and PSS of a 2. So what we did is all of these service codes have a flag in the PSOFF2 file, which is your service code file. So when we pump these down, they're going to have an S in there, and they will not be able to be used for any other consumer other than those that are set up for self-determination. So if you receive this error, it is because the consumer is in self-determination and your authorization has used a service code that's not part of the STP services. The second edit is the service code source equals S in that file, and this is when the consumer is not a self-determination delivery type and you've used a service code that is part of the SDP program. And the last one, which may be more common, is the self-determination date overlaps auth dates. And this is where your consumer service delivery type changes during the authorization dates used. So as the consumers end their traditional services and go into the self-determination program, that date that gets used in the CLI SDP file is going to be looked at. And if your authorization begins before the consumer is in the date, or the consumer is exited and you start sometime during the time period, you're going to receive this type of error message. So just examine when they started and ended their traditional services in order to determine when the authorization time period should be. Do you guys have any questions about that?
I have a question. This is James from Westside. Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, is this going to come through the Sandus Bridge?
Yes, your authorizations, the way that I understand, is you create your shell basically, and that gets pumped into UFS, and then you still run edits through UFS.
Okay.
So these edits will occur at that time. If there's additional screen edits or other edits that Sandus does, I'm not sure that they have included anything other than the service delivery type for the setup.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, so the last thing I wanted to, we want to show you is what we did with the report for posting authorizations. So again, this is all your normal auth processes. When you post, a new report's going to generate that is, if there's SDP authorizations there, and it has been set up so that it will total by budget category. So as you can see in this example, this consumer is set up with their 3 budget categories, and the service codes that fall into those categories will total up and give you the dollar amount. So this should, depending on the time period of enrollment and how long your auths are set up for, match your budget. Okay. Any questions about how rates, the FMS vendor, and authorizations will work with information?
Hi, I have a question. This is Maria from San Andreas. Okay, so you're talking about monthly for residential. So we're expecting that the process will be beginning the month of first date of the month until the 30th or 31st. We don't prorate it if they come in the middle or something. We just have to pay the whole monthly.
For the system should allow the, okay, so your FMS is responsible basically for paying for the services. So they shouldn't be submitting an invoice. If like the consumer went in mid-month, they shouldn't be submitting an invoice for more than what was paid for the remainder of the month. We don't really have this set up to factor in all of the variables that may occur, since you're not really controlling, other than a total budgeted dollar amount, what service is being paid and when.
Okay, you also indicate that it's a variable, so the zero amount, because variable, there is no set rate like hourly or daily or monthly. So either or, if you put variable, it's always a zero. There is no dollar amount. So only for the residential.
Well, you can, well, for residential, you would, when you set up the rate, you're going to use a monthly rate. Correct. When you set up other rates, you don't know how much the person's going to be charging necessarily for the service. I think the only one that will actually have a set dollar amount is probably the FMS. And these particular ones allow you to input a fixed dollar amount on the authorization, rather than doing a calculation based on dollar amount times unit. Because again, we don't have any units other than one, basically.
I see. So if it is a variable, just say 1 unit and it's $0.
For the rate, yes.
Not to exceed. And it will be in the comment section, right?
You can add whatever you want to the comment section.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Did you hear?
I'm sorry, there was some overlap.
PRC has a question as well.
Okay.
If you could go back to the example of the authorization with different subcodes there. So they're all combined under the same authorization, so all categories. What if one of them changes and we have to cancel it, or it's all set up for a year and no changes will take place?
If the service is no longer going to be provided and the money is going to be allocated to a different service code, you can put a $0 amount on the authorization, and it won't allow any monies to be submitted for it. So you have to be careful about doing that, though, because the FMS may submit things in arrears. So again, a lot of what is being, we had to integrate authorizations, and the budget is really driving more of what is being submitted for payments than, or what the consumer can use than, you know, the authorization that you're creating.
What you were saying that, I'm sorry.
If your consumer chooses to change services, then you can either create a new authorization to establish that service, or you can edit the existing authorization and add it.
So can we, from the beginning, from the start, can we create a separate authorization for each category, or they have to be combined?
No, you can create separate authorizations for every single service code if you want to do it that way.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. We have a question in the chat from San Diego. Will SDP services follow the regular rollover and rollback process?
Yes, they're supposed to integrate into it. So you will establish your authorizations for the full time period of the budget, and as long as you do your flag with that it will renew at the time of the fiscal year change, your budget services, or your authorization services and everything will roll into the next fiscal year. The system already, one thing to note about this, your authorizations, when it encumbers the funds, it basically cuts off in June. So you'll set up the services for the whole year, but you'll see that if say they started services in January, you set it from January to December, your encumbrance is only really going to account for January through June until the fiscal year rolls. So keep that in mind when you're creating the authorizations to go inside with the budget.
Hey, Paul from Alta, quick question. You had a mention regarding the subcodes for residential. How are those determined?
You can choose to determine those however you want. However, we are providing you with, it's called a base 36 conversion. It basically takes the consumer's ID number, and each consumer ID has a unique interpretation of numbers and letters. And so we'll have that out as a spreadsheet. It's in an Excel spreadsheet. We'll have that out for you guys if you guys just choose to use that. Otherwise, you can establish your own way of doing that. And that's, again, because we figured that you're not necessarily going to have a bunch of consumers with one residential rate, especially if they're living in their own apartment. You're going to have, like five consumers with 5 different rates.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Mary Lou from Inland. Okay, we are looking on, you're saying that when we set up the authorization, there will be multiple service headers, right?
You can, yes.
We can, or we have the choice to do it each one?
You have the choice. The only thing that is required is that the frequency on it has to be an annual or a monthly. You can choose to set up authorizations for each service, or you can choose to use the multiple service header option and establish all your service codes under one auth.
I see. Okay, great, thanks.
And you guys will have, a better understanding of how that will work within your own business processes. We just wanted to make the feature available in case you decide you'd like to keep everything grouped together so that it more resembles the consumer's budget.
Hi, this is Hassan from South Central.
Okay.
How do you
This is still Mary Lou. Another question.
I'm sorry, hold on a minute. Hassan had a question.
Yeah, how do you base the Social Security portion for the residential? If we put in if we are using the program.
So your FMS is probably going to be your payee. So you're really not going to be
Excuse me a second. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. So
how do you pay the Social Security if you are the payee for that consumer?
If you are the payee for the consumer, you're more than likely going to be paying the Social Security out of one of the other trust options. When this was originally given to us, it was our understanding that most of these consumers should have their trust with a third party. And so you would not necessarily be handling their funds, and you would not have to distribute that out.
If you are, what are you going to do? How are you going to distribute? If you are the payee.
Then you should still be able to distribute the funds via one of the trust options.
Like money management?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, this is Our Northern. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We were discussing rollover. Scenario of starting January and December. When it ends in June, will we have to enter the different amounts for the next fiscal year?
If your authorization is set up so that it's
annual?
Yeah, it should. You'll have to establish your non-standard rate. The dollar amount should roll okay. So if you set up for, you know, a yearly amount of $15,000, when you expect, you know, half of that to be used in the first half, when it rolls, it should be for another $15,000.
So we do calculate the difference from pay history of the previous year, correct?
Right.
Can you clarify that? Are you saying that we would have to calculate that manually and update the authorization?
Well, if you set it up, okay, so if you've got a yearly allocated amount, $15,000, then your first, and you expect that the dollar amount is going to be evenly allocated out every month, then you would set your authorization for the difference, basically. It's not the greatest part, and part of this, I'm afraid, is because of the way the budget drives the money.
So Emily, this is Isabel.
We'll put together some more information about how it functions for rollover.
That's good. Emily?
Yeah?
This is Isabel. This is Isabel at North Bay. As we consider that and you're working out the details of that, that is also going to pertain to clients that may move to another regional center. That question has come up quite a bit. What happens with the balance of that authorization? So it's something that we should consider as well when you're putting your notes together.
Okay.
And we can chat offline if you want.
Okay, I can make a note of that, Isabel. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can't read that.
Oh, it says, can the amount encumbered on the authorization be modified when the payment is initiated?
We're going to talk about encumbrances and how invoices go against them tomorrow. So the question that's about the authorizations being modified, we can address it with that.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, well, thank you for calling in. This is Emily again. I just want to say, I know this is a lot of information. Next week, we'll have the materials up on the AST webpage. And
Oh, Emily, this is Ben from Enan. I have a question regarding 1099. So we only have FMS as a vendor in our system. So are we going to put in all the amount we give to FMS vendor as the 1099 amount that they receive?
Yes.
Yes, they could. And then their expenses against that.
I mean, even though the money is for the consumer, other providers for the FMS.
It would be the FMS's responsibility, wouldn't it?
That is my understanding, but that's really a program question, so I'm going to mark that down as something to run by them. So the question, just to be clear, is for the 1099 module in UFS, do you enter everything that the FMS is paid or just a portion of it? Is that correct, Finn?
Yeah, just the earning or everything that we pay them.
Okay.
But there's no way for you to,
we don't know
there's no way for you which
Okay.
one and what, it has to go all to the FMS, and FMS will be, when she files their taxes, they can just put that as a deduction, whatever it's supposed to be, not theirs.
Okay. Yeah, and another quick question is about the error message on the authorization, that's one of the slides that you saw. If a consumer, I know, the self-determination is for billable waiver service only, right? So if a consumer has non-billable waiver service, traditional service, how will they do it in a new setup? Do they also put that in a self-determination type or outside of it?
Yeah, it was our requirement given to us by programs that consumers are either receiving traditional services or self-determination program services, so that the authorizations for traditional services and the authorizations for self-determination services cannot overlap for the time period.
Okay, so that means if a consumer have a long billable waiver service now, they will lose it when they go into self-determination.
Are those subcodes that is exactly the same as billable services? Are we still able to bill those to the federal? Yeah.
I'm not understanding the question exactly, but I think maybe what would help is if programs could provide you a crosswalk from the traditional service codes to the STP service codes. Is that?
All right. Yeah. I think that's as long as if there's all the new service code in the self-determination, can be mapped to the traditional.
Yeah.
That's the STP waiver, but they're not eligible for STP waiver, so you can have them both ways. Okay, yeah, we will definitely get a crosswalk of services. I'm going to send that up to programs to see what they can come up with for you.
Emily, I think Jim is working on that already.
Oh, really? Okay, that's
great. That would be nice. If a mapping table, that would be nice.
Yeah.
I'll let them know that you guys are eagerly awaiting it.
Thank you.
But if the consumer is on the large waiver and they're being taken off and moved to an S, you would use the waiver module to make that change of service, waiver service.
Are there any other additional questions? If any questions do come up, please feel free to email them to IT@STP. No, I'm sorry, it's IT-STP, that's IT, S as in Sam, D as in dog, P as in Paul, @dds.ca.gov. There's a whole team of us receiving those emails, so we'll do our best to follow up on them. And we really appreciate everyone attending the training today and bearing with us. This is our first time presenting this information to persons, so we really appreciate your patience. We do plan on doing a follow-up training. I know that you guys are still getting ready to start enrolling consumers in the program and building budgets and all those activities. So we're going to send out a list of dates and try to target to do a second training around the time when you'll really be using this information if you're not using it already. And provide it again. But it will be posted on the AST website next week, along with some additional documents that we referenced to help you enroll and start, filling out all your SDP stuff.
And we'll release a technical bulletin when All of the regional centers have been updated with eBilling and UFS codes to handle the SDP program.
And we're currently right now working with the regional centers to update your e-billing systems with the self-determination program update, so you can start making users and those activities. If your regional center has not contacted DDS to schedule a date for the deployment of those updates, please make sure you do so. We've pretty much filled up for most of October, so we're scheduling people out into November. And several centers have chosen to deploy a little bit later than that. So we're very flexible, but we'd like to work with you and come up with a date that works. Once the majority of the centers have been updated, we will also send out the UFS program update. So putting out the e-billing updates right now doesn't change too much for you, but it will allow your admin users to log on and start making other regional center SDP users, so you guys can start enrolling users and making the FMS user profiles. I know that can be a lot of work. Okay, so are there any questions?
Yes, we do have one more question if we have time.
Oh yeah, we have time.
This is Natasha and Val with CVRC.
Okay.
The question is, what if we budgeted a certain amount of money and client runs out of it before the term?
Okay. I will refer that to business programs for what to do for the business process, so I'm going to make a note of that. But technically, our system will allow the budget to be modified so that additional funds can be added, or so that funds can be transferred from one category to the next if needed. It does have that flexibility. But when you add, and we'll go over this a little bit more when we do the RC analyst training and we talk about budget entry on e-billing, but when you do add budget funds to the budget in e-billing, it does require someone else at the regional center to reapprove it, just to make sure there wasn't like a typo in the data entry and whatnot. But in regards to what the business process should be, I will refer that to business programs and see if we can get an answer for you.
All right, if there's nothing else, thank you for joining us.
Emily, can I ask one question regarding the user role?
Yeah, correct. Go right ahead.
So can a regular e-billing administrator create a self-determination staff role? Or does it have to be the self-determination administrator who creates the various users?
I believe it has to be the self-determination administrator. The systems are a little bit separate that way. When you log in as a traditional e-billing user, you only see traditional e-billing users and functions. And when you log in as an RC SDP user, you only see the SDP users and user functions.
Okay. And can a regional center have multiple SDP administrators?
Yes, and actually as part of the deployment, we're asking you to give us a list of persons you'd like to be set up as the SDP RC admin users. Most regional centers have provided us with 3 users, but we can make up to 5 if you'd like, and we recommend that you have at least 2, so if your main RC admin user is out sick for the day or on vacation, you have another person at your regional center who can perform those functions in their backup.
Can a SDP administrator create another administrator, or does it always go through DDS?
No, it has to go through DDS. It's just like traditional e-billing that way. But at any time you need an additional RC admin user created, you can have your regional center request that through the asp@dds.ca.gov web address, email address.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we go? Okay, and like I said, this was a lot of information, so I'm sure there will be follow-up questions. Feel free to send those up to us. And I have a list of questions from today that I'm going to follow up with business programs and see if we can draft a response to send out to the group, and then possibly post those on the AST website also. Okay?
Can you repeat the email address one more time, please, before you leave?
you repeat that?
Can you one more time repeat the email address?
Oh, the email address. Yes, it's IT, S as in Sam, D as in dog, P as in Paul, at dds.ca.gov.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, great. Thank you all.